Welcome to Chosen by Love, where fate brings hearts together in the most unexpected ways. Subscribe and join our growing family of story lovers. Tell us where you're watching from, and let's begin today's journey. Would you pretend to be engaged to save someone's last happy memory? The question sounded absurd, impossible even. Yet less than an hour from now, Aubrey Quinn would find herself staring at a sapphire ring worth more than everything she owned, wondering whether one decision could change her life forever. The city lights shimmered beyond the 39th floor windows of Hale Dynamics headquarters, painting the glass in reflections of gold and blue. Most of the employees had already gone home. The elevators were quiet, the hallways empty. Only a few lights remained on in the executive wing. Aubrey glanced at the clock in the corner of her computer screen. 7:48 p.m. Another late night. Not unusual. She rubbed her tired eyes and reached for her purse. Her father's physical therapy appointment was at 8 the next morning, and she still needed to stop by the pharmacy before heading home. As she stood from her desk, her office phone suddenly rang. She froze. Almost nobody called her this late. She picked up. Aubrey speaking. The voice on the other end was calm, deep, and unmistakable. Come to my office.
Vestonhale.
Her boss. The billionaire founder and CEO of Hale Dynamics. The man whose name appeared on magazine covers and financial news networks. The man who could walk into a room filled with executives twice his age and somehow become the most intimidating person there without raising his voice. Before Aubrey could respond, the line disconnected. She frowned. That alone was unusual. Weston rarely summoned anyone directly, and never after business hours. Grabbing her notebook, she made her way down the corridor. The executive suite felt different at night. Larger somehow. Colder. The polished marble floors reflected the muted ceiling lights. Through the windows, downtown Chicago stretched for miles beneath the dark sky. She stopped outside Weston's office and knocked twice.
Come in.
Aubrey stepped inside. The office looked exactly as she expected. Immaculate. Organized. Minimalist. Every object seemed carefully chosen and perfectly placed. Weston stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his hands in his pockets, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the city lights. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. The sleeves of his white dress shirt were rolled up slightly. For most people, it would have made him look relaxed. Somehow it only made him appear more serious. You wanted to see me? She asked. He turned. For a moment something flashed across his face. Not anger. Not frustration. Something closer to uncertainty. It disappeared almost instantly. Sit down. Aubrey obeyed. Weston remained standing. Silence stretched between them. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Strange. Weston Hale was many things, but hesitant was not one of them. Finally he exhaled. I need a favor. Aubrey blinked. In 3 years working for him, she had never once heard him phrase anything that way. What kind of favor? She asked carefully. Weston looked directly at her. I need you to pretend to be my fiancée. The words hit her like a freight train. For a moment she wondered if she had misheard him. Surely she had. You're what? Weston's expression remained completely serious. My fiancé. Aubrey stared at him, then laughed nervously. When he didn't laugh back, the smile vanished from her face. You're serious? Completely. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Mr. Hale, I don't understand. Weston. What? If you're going to pretend to be engaged to me, calling me Mr. Hale would be a problem. Aubrey was certain her heart had skipped a beat. Why would anyone believe we're engaged? Because nobody knows me as well as you do. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why would you even need a fake fiancé? Weston walked toward his desk. For the first time since entering the room, Aubrey noticed a small velvet box resting near a stack of documents. He picked it up. His expression softened slightly. My grandmother is hosting a family gathering this weekend. Okay. And there's something she wants more than anything else. He placed the box in front of her. Slowly, Aubrey opened it. A sapphire ring. Caught the light instantly, glowing deep blue against the velvet lining. It was stunning. Elegant. Timeless. The kind of ring that belonged in a museum. Aubrey's breath caught. Weston. This ring has been in my family for 3 generations. Why are you showing me this? His gaze met hers. Steady, unwavering. Yet beneath it she sensed something fragile he rarely allowed anyone to see. Because if you agree to help me, that ring becomes part of the story. Aubrey swallowed hard. Nothing about this felt normal anymore. Nothing about this felt safe. What exactly are you asking me to do? She whispered. Weston looked away briefly toward the city skyline before answering. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. I need you to convince my grandmother that we're in love. Aubrey barely slept that night. Long after she returned to her apartment, the image of the sapphire ring lingered in her mind. She had replayed every second of the conversation, searching for some sign that Weston Hale had been joking. He had not. By sunrise she was still staring at her coffee, wondering how a simple assistant from a middle-class family had somehow become part of a billionaire's impossible plan. 24 hours later, a black luxury SUV rolled through a pair of wrought iron gates nearly 12 feet tall. Aubrey sat silently in the back seat, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Beyond the gates stretched a property that looked less like a family home and more like a private resort. Manicured gardens lined the winding driveway. Stone fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. In the distance stood a massive estate surrounded by acres of perfectly maintained grounds. Aubrey swallowed. You did not mention that your family lives in a palace. Weston glanced up from his phone. It is a house. She stared at him. Normal people do not call this a house. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth before disappearing almost immediately. The sight surprised her. Weston rarely smiled. The SUV stopped beneath a covered entrance where several staff members waited. One opened her door. Aubrey stepped out and instantly felt underdressed despite wearing the nicest dress she owned. The sapphire ring rested on her finger. It felt heavier now. More real. More dangerous. Before she could gather her thoughts, the front doors opened. A woman in her early 50s approached first. Elegant. Perfectly styled. Sharp eyes. Sharp smile. She looked Aubrey up and down in less than 2 seconds. So this is the fiancée. The words sounded polite. The tone did not. Weston stepped beside Aubrey. Victoria. His voice carried a warning. Victoria Alemir Lismail. I am happy to finally meet the woman who captured my stepson's attention. Aubrey forced a pleasant expression. It is nice to meet you too. Victoria's smile widened slightly. Somehow that felt worse. More family members appeared behind her. Cousins, uncles, aunts. Every introduction felt like another inspection. Every handshake carried silent questions. Who is she? Where did she come from? Is she after the money? Aubrey could practically hear the thoughts behind their smiles. Then another voice interrupted. There she is. The atmosphere changed instantly. An elderly woman crossed the foyer with surprising energy. Her silver hair framed bright blue eyes filled with warmth. Unlike everyone else, she did not examine Aubrey. She simply smiled. Come here, sweetheart. Before Aubrey knew what was happening, the woman pulled her into a gentle hug. Grandma, Weston said, sounding almost embarrassed. Nonsense, she replied. I have waited months to meet this young woman. When she stepped back, her eyes sparkled with amusement. You are prettier than he described. Aubrey blinked. Weston looked horrified. I never described her. Exactly, the older woman said. That is how I knew she was important. For the first time all day, Aubrey laughed. A real laugh. The woman immediately squeezed her hand. I am Eleanor Hale. It is wonderful to meet you. And it is wonderful to finally have another ally in this family. Weston sighed. Grandma. What? Eleanor asked innocently. Someone has to keep you humble. As the family moved toward the dining room, Aubrey found herself watching Eleanor carefully. This was the woman Weston had been so desperate to protect. The woman he claimed wanted one last happy memory. Yet nothing about her seemed fragile. She walked confidently. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were sharp. She laughed easily. If Aubrey had not known the story beforehand, she never would have guessed there was anything wrong. The thought settled uneasily in her chest. During dinner, questions came from every direction. How did you meet Weston? When did you start dating? Who proposed first? Aubrey answered carefully, remembering every detail they had rehearsed. Across the table, Weston occasionally added small details, making the story feel surprisingly believable. The more they spoke, the more convincing the lie became. And somehow that frightened her most of all. Then, halfway through dessert, Eleanor looked directly at Aubrey. "Tell me something." The room grew quiet. "Anything," Aubrey replied. Eleanor smiled softly. "When did you realize you loved my grandson?" Aubrey's heart stopped. Every pair of eyes turned toward her. And for the first time since arriving, she realized this weekend might be far more difficult than either of them expected. For one terrifying second, Aubrey forgot every answer she and Weston had rehearsed. The dining room seemed to shrink around her as 20 pairs of eyes waited for a response. Even Weston looked still. Not nervous, just attentive, as if he was curious what she would say. Aubrey forced herself to breathe. Then she looked toward Eleanor and smiled softly. "Honestly," she said, "I think it happened the first time I saw him treat someone with kindness when he thought nobody was watching." Silence followed. Eleanor leaned forward with interest. "Go on." Aubrey's pulse hammered in her ears. She was inventing this as she went. Most people know Weston as a businessman. They see the headlines, the interviews, the company. She glanced toward him briefly. But one night everyone had gone home. A maintenance worker accidentally dropped a box of supplies in the lobby. Papers went everywhere. Nobody else stopped. Weston did. She shrugged slightly. "It was not a big moment. That is why I remember it. He did not help because anyone was watching. He helped because he thought it was the right thing to do." Eleanor's smile widened. Across the table, Weston remained expressionless, but something flickered in his eyes. "And that was when you fell in love?" Eleanor asked. Aubrey laughed lightly. "No. That was when I got curious." A few family members chuckled. The tension eased. "Love took longer," Aubrey continued. "It happened a little at a time." The answer seemed to satisfy Eleanor. She nodded and returned to her dessert. Conversation resumed throughout the room. Aubrey released a silent breath of relief beneath the table. Moments later, she felt something brush her hand. Weston had discreetly slid a folded napkin toward her. She opened it beneath the table. 2 words were written inside. "Nice save." She looked up. Weston was already sipping his coffee as if nothing had happened. Somehow that tiny gesture made her smile for the rest of dinner. Later that evening, after the guests drifted toward various sitting rooms and terraces, Weston found Aubrey standing alone on a balcony overlooking the gardens. The air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and late summer flowers. Tiny lights glowed along stone pathways below. "You handled yourself well," he said. Aubrey turned. "I almost had a heart attack. Nobody noticed." "That is because I deserve an Academy Award." A surprising sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh. "Close." "Maybe." They stood in silence for a moment. The estate looked almost magical at night. Far below, fountains shimmered beneath moonlight. "There are rules we need to discuss," Weston said finally. His tone shifted back toward business. "Familiar territory. Safe territory." Aubrey folded her arms. "I knew this part was coming. This arrangement only works if we stay disciplined." She nodded. "I am listening." Weston looked toward the gardens. "First, nobody can know the engagement is fake." "Agreed." "Second, we maintain the story at all times while we are here." "Even in front of staff?" "Especially in front of staff." Aubrey sighed. "Okay." Weston continued. "Third, no matter what happens, my grandmother cannot be hurt by this." The seriousness in his voice surprised her. This rule clearly mattered more than the others. "I understand." He nodded once. "Good." Aubrey studied him carefully. "Can I ask something?" "You usually do." "Why are you really doing this?" Weston did not answer immediately. The distant sound of laughter drifted from inside the house. Somewhere below, water splashed gently in a fountain. "Because she deserves peace," he finally said. "And because I owe her more than I can ever repay." The answer felt honest. More honest than anything he had said since this arrangement began. Before Aubrey could respond, a cheerful voice interrupted from behind them. There you two are. Eleanor stepped onto the balcony carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs. Every engaged couple deserves hot chocolate after dinner. Weston closed his eyes briefly. Grandma, do not argue. She handed 1 mug to Aubrey and 1 to Weston. Besides, you both look entirely too serious. Eleanor patted Aubrey's arm affectionately. Help me with something tomorrow morning, dear. Of course. Wonderful. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. Then wear comfortable shoes. With that, she disappeared back inside, leaving Aubrey and Weston staring after her. What does that mean? Aubrey asked. Weston looked genuinely uncertain. I have absolutely no idea. The next morning, Aubrey discovered exactly why Eleanor had insisted on comfortable shoes. At 7:30 sharp, she found herself standing beside the older woman near a large barn at the edge of the estate. The morning sun cast long golden shadows across the property. Dew shimmered on the grass. Birds chirped from nearby trees. It looked nothing like the polished corporate world Aubrey associated with the Hale family. What is this place? She asked. Eleanor smiled. The real heart of the estate. Before Aubrey could ask another question, several volunteers emerged carrying boxes filled with supplies. Some wore Hale Foundation shirts. Others appeared to be local residents. Today is our annual community outreach event, Eleanor explained. We provide school supplies, food packages, and small business grants to families across 3 counties. Aubrey blinked. You organize all this? Not anymore, Eleanor replied. I supervise and occasionally interfere. Her eyes sparkled mischievously. The interfering is my favorite part. Over the next several hours, Aubrey helped sort donations, organize paperwork, and greet families arriving from neighboring towns. She quickly forgot she was supposed to be playing a role. The people she met were genuine, grateful, kind. Many greeted Eleanor by name. Others stopped to tell stories about scholarships, emergency assistance, or opportunities the foundation had provided over the years. By noon, Aubrey was carrying a stack of folders toward the main tent when a familiar voice stopped her. Still playing dress-up, I see. Aubrey turned. A beautiful woman with flawless blonde hair stood beside a luxury sedan near the entrance. Her designer sunglasses rested on top of her head. Confidence radiated from every movement. Several nearby guests immediately noticed her arrival. Can I help you? Aubrey asked politely. The woman smiled. I doubt it. Her gaze drifted deliberately toward the sapphire ring. I am Vanessa Langford. The name sounded familiar. Then Aubrey remembered. Weston's former fiancée. I have heard of you, Aubrey admitted. I am sure you have. Vanessa crossed her arms. Although I suspect what you heard and what actually happened are 2 very different things. Aubrey sensed the trap immediately. Perhaps. Vanessa stepped closer. Tell me, how long did it take before Weston proposed? The question sounded innocent. It was not. Several people nearby were clearly listening. Aubrey understood exactly what Vanessa was trying to do. If she stumbled over details, rumors would spread through the family before dinner. Long enough, Aubrey replied calmly. Vanessa laughed lightly. Interesting. Because Weston spent years claiming he never intended to marry again. Aubrey smiled. People change. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly. Do they? Before Aubrey could respond, movement near the registration tent caught her attention. Several volunteers were gathered around a table covered in documents. Concerned voices rose above the crowd. One of the foundation coordinators hurried toward Eleanor carrying a tablet. There is a problem, he said. The grant presentation starts in 40 minutes and the sponsorship files are missing. We cannot verify final approvals. Eleanor frowned. How many applications? Nearly 60. The coordinator looked pale. Without the files, we may have to postpone everything. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Families who had traveled hours to attend began exchanging worried looks. Aubrey immediately stepped forward. What system do you use? The coordinator blinked. Excuse me. The records. Are they digital? Partially. Show me. Minutes later, Aubrey sat at a folding table surrounded by laptops, spreadsheets, and volunteers. Her years as Weston's executive assistant had taught her one thing exceptionally well: how to find information under pressure. She quickly discovered that duplicate files had been saved under multiple naming systems. Nothing was actually missing. It was simply buried beneath administrative confusion. For the next 30 minutes, she organized records, verified approvals, and created a master list. Volunteers rushed between tables following her instructions. Gradually, panic transformed into progress. At exactly 1 o'clock, the grant ceremony began on schedule. Applause erupted throughout the tent. Families smiled with relief. Eleanor squeezed Aubrey's hand proudly. "Well done, dear." Across the crowd, Aubrey noticed Weston watching her. He stood near the stage, speaking with several board members. Yet his attention remained fixed on her. For the first time since this arrangement began, there was no calculation in his expression. No strategy. No performance. Only genuine admiration. Then Vanessa appeared beside him. She followed his gaze. Her eyes settled on Aubrey, and whatever smile she wore vanished completely. The celebration continued well into the evening, but something had shifted. Aubrey could feel it every time she looked across the lawn and found Weston watching her. It was subtle, easy to miss, yet impossible to ignore once she noticed it. The scrutiny she had grown accustomed to in the office was gone. In its place was something warmer, more personal. As the last guests drifted toward the estate for dinner, Aubrey slipped away to a quiet corner of the garden. The day had been exhausting, rewarding, confusing. She sat on a stone bench beneath a canopy of oak trees and finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her phone buzzed. The smile on her face faded as she read the notification. Another medical bill. Another reminder that reality still existed beyond the gates of the Hale estate. She opened the message and studied the balance due for her father's ongoing therapy treatments. Even after insurance, the amount made her stomach tighten. She stared at the screen for several seconds before opening a different application. The listing for her car. She had posted it 3 days earlier. Her reliable sedan was not worth much, but it was the only asset she owned outright. If she sold it, she could cover several more months of treatment. A new message appeared from a potential buyer asking if the vehicle was still available. Aubrey typed a response and pressed send. "You should not be working." She looked up. Weston stood a few feet away holding 2 cups of coffee. "I was not working." "You were staring at your phone with the same expression you use when executives create scheduling disasters." Despite herself, she laughed. Weston handed her one of the cups and sat on the opposite end of the bench. For a while neither spoke. The evening breeze moved gently through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, music drifted from the estate. "You saved the event today," Weston said. Aubrey shrugged. "I organized files." "You solved a problem while everyone else panicked." "That sounds suspiciously like my job description." A faint smile appeared, then disappeared. Silence returned. This one felt different. Less awkward. More comfortable. "Can I ask you something?" Aubrey said. Weston nodded. "What happened with Vanessa?" His expression hardened slightly. Not with anger. With memory. "We were engaged 3 years ago." Aubrey waited. "The wedding never happened." "Why?" Weston stared toward the fading sunset. "Because I discovered she loved the life I could provide more than she loved me." The honesty in his voice surprised her. There was no bitterness. Only disappointment. That must have hurt. Weston gave a quiet laugh without humor. "At the time, it felt like proof that I had been right all along." "Right about what?" "That trust is expensive." Aubrey looked down at her coffee. For a moment she understood him more clearly than ever before. The billionaire everyone feared. The executive everyone admired. Underneath all of it was simply a man who had been disappointed enough times to stop expecting anything better. "For what it is worth," she said softly, "one person's choice does not define everyone else." Weston looked at her. Neither spoke. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down briefly before setting it aside. "My turn." Aubrey raised an eyebrow. "Your turn." "To ask a question." She smiled. "Fair enough." Weston hesitated. "Why are you selling your car?" Her heart nearly stopped. Aubrey stared at him. "How do you know about that?" "A notification appeared on your screen when you were answering messages." She looked away immediately. It is nothing. Aubrey. The concern in his voice caught her off guard. She sighed. My father's therapy costs more than I expected. The car seemed like the simplest solution. Weston was quiet for several seconds. You are willing to give up your transportation to help him? Of course. Most people would not. Aubrey shook her head. Most people would do exactly the same thing for someone they love. Weston did not answer. He simply watched her. And for the first time since she had known him, there was no wall between his thoughts and his eyes. There was only admiration. Genuine and unmistakable. Neither of them noticed Eleanor standing on a nearby terrace watching from a distance. The older woman smiled softly to herself before quietly turning away. The remainder of the weekend passed in a way neither Aubrey nor Weston could have predicted. The original plan had been simple. Convince the family. Protect Eleanor's happiness. Survive the gathering. Instead, the lines between performance and reality became harder to see with every passing hour. On Sunday morning, Aubrey found herself standing beside Eleanor in the estate kitchen. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Fresh biscuits cooled on wire racks. The scent of cinnamon filled the room. It felt warm, comfortable, ordinary. A strange word for a mansion that could fit several houses inside it. Yet that was exactly how it felt. You are stirring too fast, Eleanor announced. Aubrey laughed. I am making batter, not performing surgery. The batter disagrees. Aubrey slowed her movements. Better. Much. Eleanor nodded with satisfaction. You learn quickly. They spent nearly an hour baking together. Weston eventually entered carrying a stack of documents. He stopped the moment he saw flour on Aubrey's cheek. What happened to you? Aubrey narrowed her eyes. Your grandmother happened to me. Eleanor looked delighted. I like her. Weston sighed. I noticed. For some reason the exchange felt natural, like something that had happened 100 times before. Later that afternoon, several family members gathered on the back lawn for games and conversation. To Aubrey's surprise, even some of the relatives who had initially judged her seemed warmer now. Her work during the foundation event had changed opinions. Not all of them. Victoria still watched her with suspicion. Vanessa remained openly hostile. But others had begun treating her like a real member of the family. That should have made her happy. Instead, it created a knot of guilt she could not quite ignore. Every smile was built on a lie. Every welcome rested on a story that did not exist. As evening approached, musicians arrived for a small outdoor celebration. Lanterns glowed among the trees. Soft music drifted across the lawn. Guests moved between tables while staff served dinner beneath the stars. Aubrey stood near the edge of the gathering, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, when Weston appeared beside her. You disappeared. I was standing here. For 15 minutes. She smiled. You noticed. Apparently. The answer arrived too quickly. They both seemed to realize it at the same moment. An awkward silence followed. Then the music changed. A slow instrumental melody floated through the evening air. Couples began moving toward the dance floor. Aubrey immediately looked away. Absolutely not. Weston raised an eyebrow. I did. Not say anything. You were about to. Maybe. No, Aubrey. Weston. For the first time, a genuine laugh escaped him. Not restrained. Not controlled. Real. The sound caught her completely off guard. Before she knew it, he was offering his hand. One dance. She stared at it. This is part of the act? Probably. That sounds suspiciously uncertain. One dance, he repeated. Against her better judgment, she accepted. Moments later, they stood among the other couples beneath the lantern lights. Weston rested a respectful hand at her side while she placed her hand lightly against his shoulder. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing dramatic. Yet somehow her pulse still quickened. The music continued. Around them, conversations faded into the background. You know, Aubrey said softly, for someone who spends most of his life in boardrooms, you dance surprisingly well. My grandmother forced lessons on me when I was 12. Smart woman. Dangerous woman. Aubrey smiled. Definitely. They moved slowly across the dance floor. Neither seemed eager for the song to end. Near the edge of the lawn, Eleanor watched from her table with unmistakable satisfaction. Do not start planning a wedding, Victoria muttered beside her. Eleanor never looked away from the dance floor. Too late. Meanwhile, Aubrey glanced up and found Weston already looking at her. For a brief moment neither spoke. The music continued. The lanterns glowed softly overhead. And somewhere deep inside, both of them began realizing the same frightening truth. The most complicated part of this arrangement was no longer pretending to be in love. It was pretending they were not. Monday morning arrived far too quickly. By noon, Aubrey was back at Hale Dynamics, sitting behind her desk as if the weekend had never happened. The towering glass headquarters looked the same. The endless emails looked the same. The meetings looked the same. Yet nothing felt the same. Every time she heard Weston's voice through the office intercom, she remembered the dance beneath the lanterns. Every time she glanced at the sapphire ring resting inside her desk drawer, her chest tightened. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, simple, professional. Instead, it had become dangerously personal. 3 days later, Aubrey returned to the Hale estate for what she believed would be a small family dinner. The atmosphere felt relaxed, comfortable, familiar. Eleanor greeted her with a warm hug. Victoria offered a polite nod. Even several relatives who had once doubted her now welcomed her enthusiastically. The evening passed peacefully until Aubrey excused herself to find a restroom on the second floor. As she walked through a quiet hallway, she noticed a partially open study door. Voices drifted from inside. She immediately recognized them. Weston and Eleanor. Aubrey paused only because she heard her own name. She is falling for you, Eleanor said gently. Aubrey froze. Silence followed. Then Weston answered. I know. Her heartbeat quickened. And you? Eleanor asked. Another pause. Longer this time. That is not the problem. Aubrey moved closer before she could stop herself. Then what is? Eleanor pressed. Weston exhaled heavily. The problem is what happens when she discovers the truth. Aubrey frowned. The truth? She deserves honesty, Eleanor said. Perhaps. But if we tell her now, she will leave. Aubrey's stomach tightened. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Eleanor spoke again. I still think we should have told her from the beginning. Weston's voice dropped lower. The doctors were never part of the plan. We agreed on that. Aubrey felt the blood drain from her face. Doctors? Plan? Suddenly every conversation from the past week rushed back into her mind. Every mention of protecting Eleanor. Every implication that time was limited. Every emotional reason she had agreed to participate. Her hands began trembling. Inside the study, Eleanor sighed. I never wanted to manipulate her. Neither did I. Yet here we are. Aubrey stepped backward slowly. The pieces were coming together now. And she hated the picture they formed. She moved silently away from the door before either of them could notice her. Her heart pounded harder with every step. Minutes later she found herself standing alone in the garden behind the estate. The cool evening air did nothing to calm her thoughts. She replayed every conversation, every explanation, every justification Weston had given her. Then one memory surfaced above all the others. The night in his office. The moment he told her his grandmother wanted one last happy memory. A painful realization settled over her. Eleanor was healthy. Maybe not young. Maybe not perfect. But healthy. There was no tragedy. No urgent farewell. No heartbreaking final wish. The entire foundation of the arrangement had been built on a lie. Footsteps approached behind her. Aubrey already knew who it was. There you are, Weston said softly. Everyone is looking for you. She turned slowly. How long? Confusion crossed his face. What? How long have you and Eleanor been lying to me? The question hit him like a physical blow. His expression changed instantly. And that was all the confirmation she needed. Aubrey. How long? She repeated. Weston looked away briefly. You heard us. Answer me. Silence. The worst possible answer. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She is not dying. Weston closed his eyes. No, the single word shattered everything. So all of it was fake. No, the engagement was fake. Yes, the reason for it was fake. Aubrey, please let me explain. She pulled the sapphire ring from her finger. For several seconds she stared at it. The ring that had once seemed magical now felt impossibly heavy. You told me she deserved peace. Her voice trembled. You told me this mattered because you loved her. I do love her. Then why did you lie? Weston had no immediate answer. And that hurt more than any explanation ever could. Aubrey placed the ring in his hand. I cannot do this anymore. Aubrey. I meant every word I said to your family. Her voice cracked slightly. That is what makes this hurt. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Weston standing alone beneath the garden lights, staring at the sapphire ring resting in his palm. For the first time in years, Weston Hale did something completely out of character. He stopped hiding behind strategy. 3 days after Aubrey left the estate, he called an emergency meeting with his family. Every major member of the Hale family attended. Board members arrived. Relatives arrived. Even Victoria and Vanessa appeared, curious about the sudden gathering. The atmosphere inside the estate's grand ballroom was tense. Nobody knew why they had been summoned. Weston stood at the front of the room beside Eleanor. His expression was calm, but Eleanor recognized the determination in his eyes immediately. Thank you for coming, Weston began. Conversations faded. Silence settled over the room. There is something I need to say publicly.
Victoria frowned.
What is this about? Weston ignored the interruption. Several weeks ago, I asked Aubrey Quinn to pretend to be my fiancée. Shock rippled through the room. Murmurs spread instantly. Some family members exchanged confused looks. Others stared openly. Vanessa smiled with satisfaction. I knew it, she muttered. Weston continued. The engagement was never real. The whispers grew louder. Then he raised a hand. But the responsibility for that lie belongs entirely to me. The room fell silent again. Aubrey never asked for money. She never asked for status. She never tried to gain anything from my family. He looked around the room deliberately. In fact, she repeatedly helped people without expecting anything in return. Eleanor watched quietly. Pride filled her eyes. Weston drew a slow breath. I told her a story that was not true because I was afraid. The admission surprised everyone. Weston Hale never admitted fear. I was afraid that if she knew the truth, she would never agree to help. And I was afraid that if she saw the real me, she would eventually leave like everyone else. Across the room, even Victoria looked stunned. Weston reached into his jacket pocket and removed the sapphire ring. Instead, I became the reason she left. Nobody spoke. So today I am ending the lie. He placed the ring on the table beside him. And if that decision costs me family support, future influence, or even my position within this company, then so be it. The room erupted into shocked conversation. Several board members exchanged alarmed glances.
Victoria stood abruptly.
Weston, this is ridiculous. No, he replied calmly. What was ridiculous was believing honesty could wait forever. Later that afternoon, Weston drove alone through downtown Chicago. No driver. No security detail.
No assistance.
For once, he wanted no barriers between himself and the consequences of his choices. His destination was a rehabilitation center on the north side of the city. Aubrey had spent nearly every evening there since leaving the estate. He found her sitting beside her father's room, reading through paperwork in a quiet waiting area. She looked up when she heard approaching footsteps. The moment she saw him, her expression hardened. What are you doing here? Weston stopped several feet away. He made no attempt to sit beside her. No attempt to charm her. No attempt to negotiate. I came to tell you the truth. Aubrey folded her arms. A little late for that. Yes. The simple answer caught her off guard. Weston nodded once. Far too late. He told her everything.
No excuses. No careful wording.
No half-truths. He explained the original arrangement. Eleanor's involvement. His fears. His mistakes. And most importantly, his feelings. When he finished, silence lingered between them. You hurt me, Aubrey said quietly. I know. I trusted you. I know. Weston lowered his eyes briefly. And if you never forgive me, I will understand. Aubrey stared at him. For the first time since meeting him, there was no billionaire standing in front of her. No powerful executive. No carefully controlled strategist. Just a man willing to lose everything because the person he cared about deserved honesty. Then Weston reached into his pocket and placed a folded document on the nearby table. "What is that?" Aubrey asked. "The title transfer for your car." Her eyes widened. "What?" The buyer backed out. A faint smile touched his face. "I bought it anonymously and transferred it back to you." Aubrey blinked. "You cannot solve everything with money." "I know." Weston looked directly at her. "That is why I am here without offering any." 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Hale Foundation looked completely different from the place where Weston had once confessed his deception. Tonight it was filled with laughter, community leaders, local families, scholarship recipients, and business owners whose lives had been changed through programs that Aubrey herself had helped design. What had started as a temporary consulting role had grown into something far larger. Under her leadership, new outreach initiatives expanded across multiple counties. Small businesses received support. Families found resources. Opportunities reached people who had once been overlooked. And somehow, through all of it, Aubrey and Weston had rebuilt something neither of them thought possible. Trust. Not immediately. Not easily. There had been difficult conversations. Honest apologies. Long months of proving actions could match words. But Weston never stopped showing up. Not with grand promises. Not with expensive gifts. Simply with consistency. The kind that slowly heals what has been broken. Across the ballroom, Aubrey adjusted the microphone at the podium and smiled as applause filled the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said. "This program began with a simple belief. That one act of kindness can create opportunities that change lives." She glanced toward the audience. "I have seen that happen again and again." More applause followed. As she stepped away from the podium, guests rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Music began playing softly. Then Eleanor appeared beside her wearing a mischievous smile Aubrey knew all too well. "Oh no," Aubrey said immediately. "That expression means you planned something." "Maybe." "Eleanor." "Relax, dear." The older woman squeezed her hand. "For once, I am not the mastermind." Before Aubrey could respond, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly. Confused murmurs spread throughout the crowd. A spotlight appeared near the center of the room. And there stood Weston. The room instantly grew quiet. He wore a dark suit similar to the one he had worn the night he first asked her for help. Yet somehow he seemed different now. Lighter. More open. More certain. Weston stepped forward holding a small velvet box. Aubrey's breath caught immediately. Around the room smiles appeared. Eleanor looked entirely too pleased with herself. Weston stopped a few feet away. "1 year ago," he began, "I asked someone extraordinary to participate in a lie." Gentle laughter moved through the crowd. "It was one of the worst decisions I have ever made." More laughter followed. Even Aubrey smiled. Weston shook his head. "Fortunately, she was wiser than I was." The room quieted again. That lie eventually ended. But something real survived it. His eyes never left hers. "I spent most of my life believing trust was dangerous." Aubrey felt tears forming. "Then I met someone who showed me that trust is not weakness. It is courage." Silence filled the ballroom. "She taught me that kindness is not something you offer when life is easy. It is something you choose when life is difficult." Weston opened the velvet box. Inside rested the sapphire ring. The same ring that had begun everything. The same ring she had once returned. The same ring that had carried them through mistakes, forgiveness, and growth. Gasps echoed throughout the room. Weston smiled softly. "The first time I gave you this ring, it represented a story that was not true." He stepped closer. "Tonight it represents the only truth that matters." Then, before hundreds of guests, Weston lowered himself onto one knee. Tears immediately filled Aubrey's eyes. "Aubrey Quinn," he said quietly, "there is no contract. No arrangement. No performance. No conditions." His voice remained steady. "Just a man who loves you." The ballroom seemed to disappear. The crowd vanished. The noise faded. There was only Weston. "Will you marry me?" For a moment, Aubrey could not speak. Every memory rushed through her mind. The impossible request. The sapphire ring. The lies. The heartbreak. The healing. The countless moments in between. Then she laughed through her tears and nodded. Yes. Applause exploded throughout the ballroom. Guests rose to their feet. Eleanor openly cried while pretending she was not. Even Victoria smiled. Weston slipped the sapphire ring onto Aubrey's finger once more. This time it felt different. Not heavy. Not complicated. Simply right. As he stood, Aubrey wrapped her arms around him. The crowd continued cheering around them. Above the celebration, Eleanor wiped away another tear and whispered to herself, "Now that is the ending I wanted." And for the first time since a nervous assistant walked into a billionaire's office and heard an impossible request, there were no more roles to play. No more stories to invent. Only two people choosing each other, honestly and completely, and beginning the rest of their lives together. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who believes true love is built on trust, and subscribe to Chosen by Love for more unforgettable billionaire romance stories filled with emotion, hope, and life-changing moments. Your support helps us bring more inspiring love stories to life. Thank you for being part of our amazing community.